that trickiness of creation, and when the stars are aligning, when something is happening, when magic is happening, we cannot control that. The only thing we can do is try.
All right. Welcome to You're Not Gonna Make It. My name is Nico Casavecchia. I'm a filmmaker from Argentina, based in LA. Some of you know me because if you're listening to this, you're probably my friend. You're Not Gonna Make It. It's a podcast about surviving or career expectations. And I'm going to be sitting down with successful people from my life at first to debunk their Insta lives. And we're going to celebrate their low points of their careers just to make us feel better in a quest to find out what making it really means for them and for me. I think it's going to be an exploration that I'm looking forward to do myself. And my next guest is Eyal Resh. Eyal is a queer live action and animation filmmaker. He's a graduate from the MFA film directing program at Cal Arts. Eyal grew up in Tel Aviv. His stories explore the human condition and themes of intimacy, sex, and communication. He's the kind of director that has this deep empathy for all his characters. And if you see his work, and I really encourage you to check out his work after the conversation, you can almost feel what the characters are thinking in all his films. And Eyal is very accomplished. His films have been shown at Sundance, Tribeca, LA Film Festival, Outfest, Biennale, and you can catch some of them in Hulu and Amazon Prime. And Eyal is also a good friend of mine, and one that I wanted to have a conversation with because he really inspired me personally to renew my commitment with actually doing things, getting things out. Because Eyal is the kind of creator that plays the game in LA, like we all have to, but he, unlike most people here, I think, never forgets that the most important thing is actually creating beautiful art. He's really committed to doing that. He has an urgency to his creative work that I really love and I'm inspired by. And I really think that you're going to enjoy this conversation because he's a sweetheart and a treat to listen to. Very, very interesting person. So this is my conversation with Eyal Resh. Hope you enjoy it. How did we actually meet, you and I, in LA?
Well, we met through one of our mutual communities, artist communities. And when I met you, I felt like there's going to be a beautiful bromance here before even I knew what you do, before even I knew how successful you are. And I was connected to I was drawn to your energy. So I pitched you an idea for a directors collective that I would love to start in LA, because us directors don't really have an opportunity to actually see each other work. And because we're on our own sets,
Yes.
And I pitched it to you and I saw your eyes and I was like, yeah, he could be a friend. And little did we know, you became one of my closest friends since then. Also because of Sandbox, because of other things as well. We also share partners in our creations. And you actually you're the one to push me to do Sandbox. Like you were the one to say, hey, show me receipts, don't just pitch.
I love that. And I was in that birthday party, right? Leah's birthday.
That's
and
true.
We started talking. I think what I immediately responded to it because I didn't do film school. So I'm always craving that film community, which I think I have romanticized over the years. That to me is the most inspiring thing, to have peers that you can share your process with. And so maybe for the people who don't know what Sandbox is, which is everybody outside of the 12 members, can you tell me a little bit about Sandbox and your experience with it?
Sure.
Since New York?
Of course. I was part of that in New York, that same format, and I just brought it to LA because I thought LA could be a really good place for it to shine, given the amount of talent, the immense amount of talent that exists in the city and the lack of connectivity between the talent. So Sandbox is a directors collective for directors, by directors. There's no leader here. There's no teacher. And the idea is to, to train our creative muscle in working with actors in particularly, because that's something that we don't get to do that often. I mean, it depends on how much we work, right? But even directors who work a lot don't get to be with actors once a month and direct them. And I think it's important to look at it as a muscle. It is a muscle. It's not only a skill. It's a skill to be nourished. And that format gives that, because every session 4 directors out of the collective is getting to direct two actors, the same two actors and the same scene. So each director will have a take on that same scene, which is also beautiful because you see how you like the various ways you can direct the same material, right? But you're also getting a chance to give each other feedback because the other directors out of the four that are directing are sitting down and taking notes. They're observing the director working with the actors. And that's also very beneficial because me as a director, I see a director giving a directorial note to an actor. And in my head, I go like, I would have never said that, you know? So there's,
For better or worse. Yeah,
exactly. So there could be with a hint of judgment or it could be with like, an awe, but then I see how it lands on the actor, right? So I see the direction and then I see how it lands. And so I get to deduct and say to myself, that's a really interesting technique that I would have never be exposed to otherwise.
That's amazing. I mean, to me, it really, we always talk about this, how little opportunities a director, even a successful director, has to actually be on set and direct actors. If you're in film, I think if you're in theater, it's quite a different thing. And I don't have experience in theater, but I know, of course, that in theater you have a lot, like everything is working with actors, right? There's nothing outside of that almost. In film, like a successful director Tarantino had like 10 opportunities to be on set with actors. That's how crazy this thing is, to put it in perspective, right? At the end of his career, if everything goes as he's planning, he had like 10 opportunities to direct actors in films, pretty much. So every time you are on set with an actor, it really feels terrifying. If you don't really have that muscle trained. And I understand some directors are better at that than others. I'm always in awe on how natural it comes to you, because I come from, a background where my filmmaking was almost devoid of any actors for a long time. I evolved into this live action director that works with actors. So because I don't have any formal training, that is something that I had to work on myself. Mm-hmm. And so Sandbox have become very important in that process, because it allows us to really naturalize the connection, the conversations with actors. And what I found fascinating as well is that, can you tell me a little bit about how the scenes are worked? Because there's no scene description, and I think that changes everything and veers it into the writing territory as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like not all the scenes will fit this format, right? This format is very specific because essentially every scene needs to work for like different visions or interpretations of the directors, right? So it can only be a scene that does not have a space that's specified in the text, right? Because 101 in scene analysis, let me go back for a second. 101 in scene analysis is like, what does the text give us? What is in the dialogue itself? And that's something that I've spent hours and hours researching and dissecting, what information is in the text and then going with that. That's a very important directorial skill to have, right? Like we're detectives. We kind of pull information from the dialogue and see, what are the hidden things that are not said, So these scenes cannot enclose where they are or who they are for one another in this format, right? Because I want each director I want one director to place the scene on the moon, and I want another director to place it in a grocery store aisle,
So you need a scene that allows for that openness and creativity to flourish, right? Because
exactly.
It's interesting how some scenes immediately give you, just through dialogue, even if you devoid them from scene description, through dialogue, it just creates connection between, like a very specific connection between characters, hierarchy, status hierarchy, like relationship,
power relation
gender,
dynamic,
relation dynamics. And what we're trying to do is something like scenes that would be so open, at the same time interesting and compelling, but open enough for the director to just create the setting, almost write the setting, right?
I agree. And I feel like, again, there's something to be said about an important writing exercise for the directors who bring in the scenes, right? That's a separate thing almost, right? Because we're there as directors in this room, right? But there's something about the beauty of seeing a dynamic that is written in a dialogue being brought into fruition in so many different ways, right? It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing to see how much you can do with material. And to me, this is the biggest source of inspiration. Aside from keeping my muscle warm, getting more directors' friend, acquiring more of them, like making more connections, it's mostly about that idea of like, wow, how much power a material have, like how much you can leverage it and play with it, how moldable it is, and how much it's up to you as a director. And I completely agree with you that for directors, working with actors is the scariest thing, which is also why it was hard for us to recruit directors to this collective, because
it's crazy how people or they show up once and they just run away. Like they sometimes come in as observers and then they just run away. They're like, make up an excuse, the trip, whatever. Right. They don't show up again.
I know, but there are those who stick, right? And those are the people that we want with us. And those are quite honestly also the people that will continue on doing. And that's kind of factual, right? We see that in the work that is being put out there from directors of the collective, festival acceptance and stuff like that. It is terrifying. It's terrifying to work with actors for directors. It's also terrifying to do that in front of other directors, So it's like this, extra layer of complexity.
Yeah. No, it's tough. I think it's a nourishing place, but it's a tough environment because you have to expose yourself. You're directing these actors in a scene. You have 20 minutes and you are trying to convey something, right? And in a way, you feel exposed to all the other directors that are there, even though you understand that we all have made a pact of creating a safe space for it, but it doesn't take away the nervousness, I guess.
I agree. And you know what? It ties into something that I would love to discuss with you maybe a little later in this episode, that, when you are doing something as a creative, doesn't matter if you're a director or not, right? My therapist always tells me, this is you at a certain point of your life trying something. And it's really important to keep that in mind, right? This is not you, full stop, right? Often as creatives, and I am doing it all the time myself. Yeah, you tie your creation to your identity as if that is you, right? And that puts a lot of pressure on you, right? But if you change the angle on it and you say, no, this is something I'm trying right now. This is a film I shot at a certain point of my life when I was dealing with X, Y, and Z. And this is how it came out. And it is what it is. This is not who Eyal is, right? And same thing you can say for so many things, because that trickiness of creation, and when the stars are aligning, when something is happening, when magic is happening, we cannot control that. The only thing we can do is try, right? And sometimes it will happen and sometimes it will not. So what does that say about me, my identity, if I create a shitty film? So the only thing it says is that at one point of my life, I created a shitty film, but it doesn't mean that in a different one, I cannot create a masterpiece. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Listen, this is such an interesting subject to me, that this bond between identity and work. Mm-hmm. I think that it's one of the things that I'm most interested about, and maybe perhaps is the core of what I wanted to do with this podcast, because, the title is You're Not Gonna Make It. And it's an ironic title. I don't mean to be rude with it. What I try to do with it is to say, okay, if you consider yourself that you're not going to make it in the way that you're expecting, which is this unrealistic, idealized version that it leaves outside of yourself, right? The success of others leave always outside. Like you can never experience, because it's a construction. Like when you're sweeping in Instagram and you see somebody succeeding, that is of course a built construction that has nothing to do with it.
Sorry. Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's built. It's something that is not experienced by those people the way that you are experiencing it. And so I feel like it's because we tie the identity of people to their work, we tend to do the same with ourselves. And that's such a harmful path, especially in this town where everybody kind of like does that, right? Like you got to wear your work as an identity to just intersect with others in a way, so many times. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me, when I was doing my feature, I have this image in my head that was so bad. I think looking back was so unhealthy, which was the idea that the movie was a tattoo. Was it?
Out of 2 out of 10?
It was something that I was tattooing in my body and would never get, I could never remove. And that was listening to you talk about the idea of decoupling ourselves from our own work as an identity and just saying, okay, this is the state I am in this moment. it's such a better narrative or better metaphor for the work, and I think it's a healthier one.
And yeah, I was about to say, and so much more healthy and conducive to creativity, because creativity being so tricky, right? Or tapping into that path of your imagination being so tricky. The worst enemy of tapping in is being aware, being in your head, thinking of you, comparing yourself to others. So that is, or taking it too deep. It puts rocks on your wings, in a way.
Yeah, 100%. And that it's so easy to see that neurosis in others, because of course we perceive, others in such a vivid way. And LA in particular is a city where I think we talk a lot about this. It's like, how do we escape that energy sometimes, that anxiousness of like the career, and everybody is so, you can feel that they're so anxious about, who did what are they doing, where are they, coming from. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that attracted me to you and why we became friends is that, I mean, you can have that conversation, and there's a place for in your life, to pursue those goals and be, like everybody else, right? Like trying to understand what is the strategy in your career, but like you always leave space for creation. I think you're a doer, and that's what is the most inspiring to me. I mean, since I met you, you shot 2 short films. You created a beautiful project online. There's so many things that are out there, because you were not waiting for permission to make them. I think it's we're living a life of begging for permission to be creators, right? Mm-hmm. Like with the pitching constantly to people who would validate this or not on basis that are completely foreign to the creative process. Like the reasons that an executive may have to greenlight or not something has nothing to do with your creative process. So I think it's so important that you're creating things, putting them out at the same time you're pitching, at the same time you have this more ambitious projects.
I agree. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you. Yeah, that's in Hebrew, we say that's a candle to my legs, as in like, this is kind of like lighting the road for me. And I'm not always able to do that because it's hard. Sometimes you get in your head, and it's also human. Yeah. But then I revert to some, sayings or quotes that I kind of collected along the way, mm-hmm. that puts me back in that place. Like I've written down to myself, like David Wojnarowicz, I'm hoping I'm not butchering his name, says that transition is always a relief. Destination means death to me. If I could figure out a way to remain forever in transition, in the disconnected and unfamiliar, I could remain in a state of perpetual freedom. And that I keep That's going back, right? Because this encapsulates the essence to me of what is to be free, to look at it as a transition, as a movement. And then you don't have all these expectations. I mean, you do, but at least they're more managed, they're better managed, and allows you to keep doing and keep moving and keep creating. Yeah.
I love that, because maybe there is hope obviously, like, you're never going to be perfect, and we always fall in the trap of expectation and the trap of identity as work and all that stuff. But if you create a system of values and a place you can go back to, at least that's what I try to do, is like, I'm a human. I make all those assumptions. I'm very, I find myself being calculative about my work. And when I do, I try to say, all right, but let's try to find at least a place where you can be free from those expectations. Like, is there a creative place that you can go and carve out time for creating without expectation, right? Because it's a check-in with what your voice is at the time. Right? And I think that only comes from having always, and I'm interested to discuss this with you, having always a project that you're the master of. A project that does not involve the approval of anybody else. Like, at least something in your life that you're doing. And I think this can be applied to directors, but also writers, actors, everyone, is, do you have a place and a project that it's going to happen no matter what, that will express your voice? And it could be a small thing. It doesn't have to be sophisticated, right? But that to me has always been the North Star of like surviving the other side of me that is very much about like, who am I pitching what? What is the state of that? Who's doing like all that, the industry talk in my mind, mm-hmm. that is not really, it can kill creativity, as you said before.
Yeah. So you're asking me if I do have that place?
Yeah. Where do you go? How do you just kind of like break away from the chatter and then go to that creative place?
Like I feel like it's a really good question because, and that's for the listeners who are above 30. I feel like something is happening. Not that I mean to pull all these quotes, but Stella Adler said,
Like that.
Yeah, me too, because they're really helping me, But she said that like life crushes your soul and art reminds you that you have one, Yeah. And I feel like that's my last quote for today, I promise.
No, don't. Keep them coming.
Okay. But I was feeling that it changed with maturity, right? Something about around 30 happens to you where, the world is no longer quite your oyster as it used to be. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because you're learning of the truth of what it means to live. It's also really good for artists because you have more depth. You understand more about humanity, right? So in recent years, I'm 35. So in recent years, I needed to keep finding or looking or searching for a place that I can tap into my imagination. Despite life trying to crush it and bring it down to like numbers, mortgage, insurance, like finishing the month, like with a plus in my account. So I've discovered, there are all kinds of spaces that I do that. And I love going to Joshua Tree I rent a cabin, like a super simple cabin. I cook outdoors to myself. I do that every now and then. Right. But then like I do morning pages, right? I do artist dates with myself that came from reading The Artist Way. Right. But I also do things that I know will help me keep the path to my imagination open, which is to me the reason I live. I swear. Because I know that if my path to my imagination is truly open, the rest will follow. I'm not concerned, right? Everything else would happen. So the maintenance work is how to do that, how to keep that flow happening. And it's all of the above that I just mentioned. But there are specific things that I know do that to me, like cooking. Yeah. Like still photography, 35 millimeters, film. Right? Yes. Reading
There's
poetry.
A slowness there, right? Maybe that is interesting and
the
conducive
patience.
to thinking. Patience,
yeah. The patience. I think we totally lost it. I'm not the first one to say that, of course, but like this is detrimental to imagination. Imagination is not fast paced, Imagination needs air, needs space to exist, because otherwise you don't tap into it, So I feel like doing things that take time and I indulge in them make me feel like I'm nourishing something in myself, and in turn would manifest itself in that internal conversation that I need in order to create.
I have so many questions, but I want to go back to, you were mentioning before New York. I have a blurry understanding of your life in New York because it was before, everything happened before I met you. All important.
Right. As of now,
we're new friends.
It's still written. It's still being written. Yeah.
But yeah, can you tell me a little bit about New York and how that connects to, how does it end up in CalArts for you? Because I want to see where did you build these mechanisms and this kind of like tools that you were discussing, you were talking about before, those creative tools? It seems like that's the origin.
CalArts, full stop. Yes.
Okay.
So I didn't live in New York before CalArts. I actually graduated CalArts and moved to New York, and then I came back to LA because I love her.
That's why it's confusing to me.
Yeah, I love her to death. So I finished my high school in Israel and I went into the army. It's a tricky time to say that. I'm not sure when this episode will air, but I was lucky because I studied in this really prestigious high school in Israel that is like fame. It's like an arts high school. The only one in Israel, in the center of Tel Aviv. The only place I felt belong because I was always a fish out of water. And this place I can flourish in, And I was a child actor. I acted in the Royal Theater in Israel. Yeah, I was for 7 years. And so my whole identity was about acting.
I didn't know that. How did I even know that?
I know. Here you go. Yes.
That's why you're so good at directing actors. Motherfucker.
I do think it's connected because I know what it means to be in a character. And also at CalArts, I performed a lot. I took a lot of acting classes. I think it's very important for directors to act, even if they suck at it. It's not about being good. It's about understanding what it means, and not being aware of yourself. Anyway, my mom called the secretary at the high school to sign me up for the auditions for theater, for the theater department. And the secretary told her, well, it's very hard to get into theater. You might want to consider also signing him up for film, for the film department auditions. Wow. And she did without letting me know, because a year before I edited and created my own bar mitzvah video for myself.
That's so Eyal for people who don't know you.
That's very me. I cannot agree more. Very. But the thing is that the project crushed the night before my bar mitzvah. So
what do you mean the project crushed?
It was back then, you know, like you couldn't
computer.
Really edit. The computer crushed. I couldn't access the project. The project file was corrupted. And then I spent the whole night before my bar mitzvah. I was like, no, I'm finishing that film. And I shot, it wasn't just a clip with a few.
You redo everything.
Everything. And then I arrived to my bar mitzvah completely exhausted, like out of it, because of this film. But so my mom remembered that story because it was only a year before, and she signed me up to the theater, to the cinema department. And I didn't get into theater, and I got into cinema.
Okay.
And that's just a story of how life sometimes kind of like jolts you into a direction that you need to end up in, because I'm so happy. I'm not an actor. I'm not an actor.
It's tough to be an actor. I always think about that. Like if we there's so much rejection as a writer director for me. Like I can't believe what it would be to put my body in the equation of that rejection. It's always so interesting. Right?
I agree. They're a very unique breed of humanity. My favorite. I'm in love with one. I share my life with one. I love actors. I am obsessed with them. They are fascinating creatures for me. And I have a lot of respect for them, for what they do, because they're literally giving you their heart on a silver platter a few times a day and not hearing anything in return, But when they do get roles, because a lot of them do, they give you from that magic that they have to transform. And that to me is,
And how this ends in California? You left it at your bar mitzvah.
That's true. Right. So I went to Thelma Yellin is the name of the school. I studied film there, and then I graduated. And then the army took me to be the director of the cinema unit of the Israeli Air Force. So I made films for the Israeli Air Force, not propaganda films, mostly films around like instructional videos to teach people how to do things. Actually fascinating stuff I did there. It's only in my really fucked up country.
I heard you said that sometimes that was a big school, a film school for you.
It was the best film school. Not artistically, that's why CalArts came after, but very much on an operational level. Because I directed, for instance, a film, an hour-and-a-half film about how to fuel as you're in the air, which is a very complex.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And so we shot 5 days in circles above the Mediterranean Sea with a Boeing 747 filled with gas tanks, 2 F-15s with camera operators on the back, a cargo plane flying in circles showing. So essentially I used an F-15 as a dolly, right? And that's, And that's something as a 19 years old.
That's a nice toy to play with. It's going to take you a while before you can access that kind of gear again.
It's true. That's true. And so I'm grateful for that. Also, we were a bunch of artists stuck in the army, like all the unit, it's a very small unit. Like we were filmmakers in the army that need to get by because we need to do our 3 years. So we were creative about it, and our commanders didn't understand shit about film. So it was a really interesting dynamic because usually a commander is the one who is leading the know-how. But in this case, it was us, the soldiers who did that. And it was a really amazing time in my life, I have to say, outside of what we needed to do. I mean, there's nothing violent about it. It was actually pretty vanilla. But yeah, so then I was already in high school, I knew I'm a director, but then it was really solidifying itself. I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And in that unit, I fell in love with a guy who was the head of animation of the unit because there was an animation department as well. And we worked together a lot. I directed films that he needed to create animations for, which is also how I kind of dabbled in animation and know how to direct it and do that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I wish we had 3 hours. Okay.
Right. So then he always wanted to study abroad. I never wanted to. And then he said, Eyal, I really want to go to either CalArts or NYU or the big schools. And I was like, let me think on it for a second. Because I didn't want that. And for 3 months, I was pondering. I went to Europe to a Euro trip to think about it. And at the end, I decided that I want to do that for myself, not for him, because that's not a reason to, cross the world for school and pay $20,000 per semester. And I decided that I want to do it. And then we applied to many schools together. It was really nerve-wracking if we will get into the same school and what we'll do.
That's tough too, right? It seems like suddenly introducing certain competition inside the couple, right? At that young age has to be difficult to manage that kind of expectation, I bet.
Of course. And it was a beautiful love. He came out of the closet. It was a secret for a year. It was it's a story for a film, unfortunately, many films have done that since, so I don't really want to tell that story because it's not.
But not in the way you probably want to do it. I don't think.
You're right, actually. Yes. So anyway, like it was nerve-wracking. And then we both got into CalArts, and my choice was CalArts because of their philosophy. I didn't want to go to a film school that operates
What is that philosophy for me that I don't understand anything about the academic world? I mean, I understand CalArts to be kind of like more experimental, more highbrow, more kind of like exploratory. Are those things kind of relate to the truth?
In a way, yes, I agree with everything you just said, but like I feel like there's something even deeper than that. CalArts, and I saw that from their requirements for the application. They cracked the code of how to teach art. And I cannot stress that enough. They are not a production company school, right? When you need to go through committees to approve your film and everything is very organized for you so that you can make a film. It of course has a plus and has a minus, right? Like it's not only good, but their philosophy is let's make you a better, more richer human being. And as a result, you will become a better artist as well, right? And so CalArts is a federation of art schools, essentially. Within it, there's the school in film of film and video. And within that school, there's the film directing program, which is what I was doing. I was doing a master in it, even though I didn't have a bachelor because of the army. So I studied for the master's without getting a master's. But so I got a diploma. But one day, if I want to do my bachelor's, anyway, not relevant. So they essentially, if you're a master student there, they open up to you all the classes from other schools as well. So yes, you focus on your discipline, and I had amazing classes in film, amazing, and most of my classes, like 65-70% of my classes were film, but the rest was like go and explore. So I took, I don't know, color and design.
Ties back to that creative space and tools that you were discussing before, right? How do we create that space to be creative and to find your voice in the chatter?
Of opening that path to the imagination.
Opening it,
and another thing, because you're totally right, because another thing that really happened is like there are numerous forms of expression. It's not about how you express, it's about the expression. Yeah, it's about being connected to it, because then, like you can choose what's the right way for you. But to me, that was the biggest lesson, because I took classes in acting from the acting school. I took African dance from the dance school. I took music theory and piano lessons from the music school. Yeah, because I play piano classically. And
of course you do.
I need to play for you. I've never played for it. But it's what was mind-blowing to me is seeing how the way Moonlight Sonata is structured from a musical perspective, how much it's relevant for a story and for filmmaking and for structuring a script. I was mind-blown. And this is just one example out of so many. I took a sculpting class, and I decided to sculpt one of the characters of the film that I'm working on right now. And that helped me gain access to this character's psychic, and it helped me crack the story just by making a sculpture.
That's amazing. And I want to, just to start closing, I wanted to talk about a specific thing on your work. I touch it in the introduction to the episode when I said that you are extremely empathic. I feel like you really, everything I have seen from you or read, because I have the privilege to see your writing, your writing before everybody else.
Yeah.
Always has a deep understanding of the character state of mind. It's almost as you can like feel what the characters are thinking at that moment. They behave in a way that is maybe weird, but at the same time completely relatable. You understand that it's where they're coming from. And I was revisiting Arrival, your short film. And in that film, there's a Israeli woman traveling with a kid, which is like a 5-year-old kid, in a train in Germany. And they're fresh from Israel. And they're going, probably to visit her family, her husband in Germany. And the whole short is in the train. And the kid starts connecting with this older woman that is across from them. And it becomes a very intimate situation between them. This is how I perceive the short. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good rendition of it.
No, you are.
But it becomes like a very intimate situation between this older woman and the kid. The kid goes, steps away from the mother and goes across the seats and starts playing with the woman. And it feels almost like it's her grandmother, and they establish this very intimate connection. And at some point, and I think this is the crux of the film, right? This is the emotional core of the film. The train enters a tunnel, a very dark tunnel, and the image goes black. And then suddenly that connection of the kid with the older woman becomes dangerous. This immediate, like, you're very good at communicating the danger of that. Like this, suddenly reality, it opens up a space of uncertainty, right? It's almost a tear of uncertainty in this fabric that you created. And you start worrying about that for some reason, some irrational reason. And then immediately after the train comes out of the tunnel, the snatches the kid from the older woman and leaves the train as soon as he arrives to the station. And I want to talk about that, like the things that you've been, before you were talking about accessing creativity and creating spaces for those ideas to flourish. To me, if I was writing that film, I would only know that I have a film when I come up with the idea of the tunnel, because the tunnel is so symbolic, right? That dark tunnel is so symbolic that it creates the film. It creates a tension for the film. And I wonder, I don't know if you know this, probably you don't, but do you know how you came up with that idea? How do you come up with an idea of this train getting into a dark tunnel that makes the whole train black and suddenly dangerous for a very mundane situation?
First, I love thank you. I loved it. I love the way you experienced the film. That's moving for me. It's always moving for me to hear someone talking about something that they felt from something that I've created. This story happened to me with my mom in the 90s in Berlin, which was right after the wall fell. So it's a famous story in my family. And I had a student exchange program with the DFFB with CalArts, and I went to study there for a semester, which was also life-changing for a different episode. And I'm German. My roots are German. So I always felt at home in Berlin, and I have this weird feeling that I have to create something about, like, being at home. What is home? As an immigrant, the idea of home is obviously more complex. And the idea for the tunnel just came like a lightning. Like it was, but it came because I sat on the S-Bahn in Berlin for a long time. And I just sat and thought, because I knew the film has to happen only on a moving train. That was clear to me. Also, for the reference for the Holocaust, I thought it's really interesting. Also, trains always fascinated me.
The woman is German, by the way. So and they're Israeli. It's like this tension is clear as well. Like that is in the subtext.
Right. She could have been alive during the Holocaust, right? Like that is the idea, right? Like that's what scares the mother as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, as I was thinking, the train went into a tunnel, and I was looking at the lights that are like flashing by as the train moves inside the tunnel, And I was like, it looks like if there were a time machine, it would have looked like that, probably, I guess. Like, I don't know, but it's just an interesting visual. And then it's like, ooh, what if it happens in the film? And then it goes even more abstract, and the lights are not only moving linearly, maybe they fly upwards, all of a sudden. So it's not, it's like disorienting you.
It's a very disorienting moment, yeah.
Right. And that's what anxiety does too, right? It disorients, it distorts the reality. And that, you're right, that moment is a moment of anxiety, of collective trauma. Because this old German lady is very cute with this boy, but it doesn't matter. It's almost like we're wired in our DNA to fear, and I feel like that fear is what's creating now so much war in the world.
I wonder what is the real story behind it, like that started the whole thing.
Well, my mom, I was this 5 years old boy, and my mom was with me in Berlin. They did a layover on the way to the US, and I was just sitting with my mom in a car, and this old German lady thought I'm cute. And my mom kept describing it like the scariest feeling of her life, because she was constantly thinking, what would have happened if this would have been like 60 years ago, And this older woman was like 80 or so, So she was clearly alive and conscious during the, and then she tries to talk to me and her. She thinks I'm cute, and my mom just takes me and goes away. So that was the story. Since then, my mom didn't come back to Germany because of that trauma that she experienced. And I was like, how much we're carrying with us of fear. And that's a criticism that I have on Jews all over the world, like that idea of like, if you're fearful from something to happen to you, it's almost like the beating father syndrome, where where you will be more aggressive, because you're operating out of fear that something will be taken away from you, So in a gentle way, very feminine way, because these are two female protagonists, I wanted to touch upon that idea. But that's all that happened between my mom and this old lady.
I love that you found the emotional core of the film, but also kind of like a visual representation of that, because the film could have been the other thing without it. But I feel like cinema is such a powerful medium when you find that analogy, that metaphor that also is organically weaved in the story. Because this, of course, is something that happens in tunnels. But when a train gets into a tunnel, things maybe go dark. And the way you portray it, it really ties you back to the story. That's very interesting.
I agree. I've been thinking a lot about that idea. Also, it's present in your film and in Border Hopper, like that power of cinema to take you outside of the situation to a more less tangible realm, but it's still believable. I feel like that is a huge goal for me, and I'm trying to do that. I think it was very successful in Arrival with the tunnel, right? But now with my next film, I'm also trying to do something similar, not with a tunnel, right? But like to transcend the story into something that could not be said in words, but still is indigenous to the world of the film.
Yeah, how do you find that shift organic and introduce an element that otherworldly, but that feels related? It's extremely hard. It's an exercise in tone as well. I'm writing right now a project that has that shifts in tone from very grounded to
I love that project.
Whimsical. And
right.
I'm working so hard on that bridge. It's like you have to be able to feel it in your body to make sure that it's working. And you have that's the cinematic eye you need to train to make sure that your intuition is correct. That you can foresee, you can almost play the film in your head and verify that it's working. And I'm always surprised with certain directors. I see a scene and I go, how did you know that would work? Of course it comes as a process, but sometimes it's so precise. The vision is so crisp that makes you wonder, how did you know that when you put those very weird elements together, it will accomplish what it was set to accomplish? It's a very difficult question to answer.
The biggest.
So it's the biggest. And I think it's what we train for and comes with maturity and comes with the process of knowing and having experienced things, right? Like having put together films. That's why I think it's so important to shoot things, because until you don't do them, you don't trust yourself that, okay, yeah, that will work. It's cooking, right? Like those ingredients mixed together, I've tried them before, they work. If we add this other thing, it may even be better.
Right. When it's simple, it's right. That's just the best equation, because if something is simple, something is clear. If something is clear, you can communicate it, and I keep reminding myself of that. And in some of my projects, I forget it for a second in my life, and I go into my head, and then the project is not as good,
Yeah.
What does that mean about me? Probably nothing. Probably that in that time of my life, I just didn't tap into the right place, Not that I can't.
Yeah, I hear you. To finish, I want to ask you, what's next for you? What are you excited about of the things that you're planning, you're plotting?
Yeah, I'm super creative these days. Yeah, it comes and goes in waves. So I'm just trying to ride that wave as much as I can. But I'm editing 2 short films that I've shot 3 months ago and 5 months ago, and I'm mostly writing my feature. I finally found I was writing like a different feature film, and again, it wasn't simple. And I knew that deep down inside. And I was like, maybe, Eyal, you will learn from your mistakes for a change. And maybe just write something that you can smell, that is so crisp, you can almost touch it, And so I pivoted after like a year of writing, and I'm very happy I did that. This other film might one day see the light. It's just not its time, at least not with me. And I was always a believer in of the story calling to you versus you inventing the story, So I followed my scent of smell, and I landed on this idea, and I'm extremely excited about it, and I'm working really hard on it. I feel like there's a lot here, so I'm just writing every day.
Another hour about the process of writing. Maybe it's for another episode.
Sure.
But I want to thank you very much for coming. It was such a great way to start. I'm really, really grateful. I'm sure people will love it as much as I do.
Thank you so much. You're amazing. I love what you're doing. I think it's important. I think your perspective needs to be heard in the world. And I'll see you tonight in dinner.
Let's do that. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.